Hi everyone, it's Melissa, and today I am going to talk about all of the books I've read during the first half of 2026. So I have read 13 books so far this year, and I haven't really talked about any of them because I have been on a bit of a Booktube hiatus and have just recently come back. So I thought I would give you a quick overview of everything I've read and what I thought of those books. So I will go through these in chronological order. So the first book I finished this year was The Break by Katherena Vermette. She is an Indigenous Canadian author. I had read a poetry collection of hers, which I really enjoyed. I can't remember the name of the collection right now, but I will leave it in the description. So I was excited to read this novel, and it did not disappoint. So The Break starts with this woman witnessing a very brutal assault outside her home in this area called The Break. And the novel kind of goes through how that affects her, how it affects the victim's family and other members of the community, and how all of these pieces, all of these people and their life stories are connected. And it really challenges the way you think the book is going to talk about this assault. It really goes places that I didn't think it would go. It's a very difficult book, like in that it's very upsetting. It is also not very heavy on plot. We're talking about the aftermath of this assault. There's not really like a story that's happening. It's more just looking at how people are reacting to this or how it affects their lives. And it is so not about a plot. It is really about the characters. It is a very kind of profoundly sad book, but really brilliant. I gave it 5 stars. The second book I read this year is in the Murderbot Diaries series. It's a short story. This is by Martha Wells. The story was called Home. It is a story that takes place between books 4 and 5 of the Murderbot series. I don't remember a lot about this short story. It's a story that doesn't necessarily tie into anything in the books. So it was fine. I enjoyed reading it, but it wasn't like entirely necessary to the series or provide any big revelations or anything, so I gave it 3 stars. Book number 3 is The Year of the Tiger, An Activist's Life by Alice Wong. So Alice Wong was a disability activist. She was a disabled author, an activist, and this is about her life, primarily her life as an activist, and she makes it very clear in her intro to this book that it is not a memoir, and it is specifically not a disability memoir. And while disability plays a heavy part in it because she was disabled and that was an important part of her life, it's not really what the book's about. It was challenging, not in terms of difficulty of reading, but challenging in terms of like how you think about things or how it frames things, like in the disability world, and even just like in terms of activism and who gets to be an activist and how. It's just challenging in the best way possible. What I liked most about this book is Alice Wong's tone and humor. It was just very sharp, very funny, witty, and sarcastic. So if you like that kind of tone, you would love this book. I gave it 4 stars. Book number 4 is another Murderbot book. It's number 6, Fugitive, Telemetry. And this book I remember liking. I'm trying to like choose my words carefully because I don't want to give spoilers because it's part of a series. I don't know how much I should really say. I felt like this was a true return to Murderbot, solving a murder, solving this like mystery under like a time crunch and under seemingly impossible conditions. Like that's where Murderbot thrives, is problem solving under these like extreme constraints. And I just thought that element was great. I didn't give this like perfect marks only because I was confused for like a lot of this book, and I didn't realize until like after, or like, oh, not after, but a while into the book, that this is not chronologically after book 5. So it's book number 6, but it actually it takes place before the 5th book. And so I was just confused. So I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed, like I said, the return to Murderbot, but because I was confused for a lot of it, it kind of hampered my enjoyment. But if you know going into it that is chronologically not number 6, even though it is number 6, you will enjoy it more. So book number 6 I actually have to hand, and that is The Trouble with Mrs. Montgomery Hurst by Katie Lumsden. Katie has a channel, Books and Things. I will link her channel below. Please excuse my cat. My cats are still very young, and they're a little bit, let's say, high energy. So back to the book. I really enjoyed this. This was a very kind of like light, airy, very much a summertime type of read. I like the kind of classic vibes. This is set in I believe it's like the early Victorian era. And it had that kind of like small town English countryside, everyone knows everyone's business gossip kind of vibes to it. It reminded me of Emma, which I know is Regency, but it reminded me of Emma in a lot of ways. Just nosy neighbors, everyone in everyone's business. The only thing I struggled with in this book was kind of keeping the characters straight, because there are a lot of characters, but there is like a list of characters at the front, which I refer to constantly, which was helpful. But once I kind of got into the groove of like knowing who was who and like what their background was, I got really into it, and also like was invested in what was going to happen specifically with a couple of characters. But yeah, I just thought this was a really fun book. There's some like heavier topics in it, but it is not dark. It is not dreary. It is very much kind of like, I feel like, a feel-good type of book. And I did feel good reading it, and I gave it 4 stars. I think I messed up my counting. That was book number 5. Book number 6, unfortunately, was a disappointment. And this was something I have been looking forward to reading for so long, and that is Briefly a Delicious Life by Nell Stevens. I know so many people love this book. I thought I would love it. It sounded exactly like the type of book I would love to read, but just kind of fell short for me. I didn't hate it, but it did fall short. So this is about the ghost of a young teenage girl, and she's haunting like this old abbey, or this old, like this area where monks used to live. And it's set on an island off the coast of Spain, I believe, whose name's escaping me at the moment. But the real historical figures, George Sand and Frederick Chopin, arrive on the island for Chopin's health, because he's very ill. And they think that this like warmer climate, or like this island, will help cure him of that, or be better for his health. And it's based on like real events where George Sand and Frédéric Chopin indeed had a relationship, and I believe also had moved to this island for a period of time. And this teenage ghost who haunts the abbey where they are now staying, they're like renting it out, she becomes somewhat obsessed with George Sand. It's from her point of view, and we get her thoughts about George and Chopin and George Sand's 2 children who are also there, like the family, and we get her point of view about like the community of the island. We get some flashbacks of her life when she was living, and also flashbacks of George Sand and Chopin's life, particularly George Sand's life before, and also kind of like flash forwards to what will happen later. It was one of those things where the writing was great, and I think like Nell Stevens' writing style is definitely a writing style that I enjoy, but I found the story itself a bit, dare I say, pointless. Like, if there was a point, it escaped me. I just was kept waiting for some sort of something, and I just felt like I got nothing from the book. The author chose to incorporate these 2 real-life figures, and I assumed it would be for some sort of reason, but you could have inserted any 2 characters in these roles, and it wouldn't have changed anything, in my view at least. I may have missed something. There might be something in here that just completely went over my head, but I just feel like, what was the point of writing this particular story about these two characters, where you're basically just getting a ghost observing them, and you could have told that story in a different way that felt more purposeful, or you could have told the story of this ghost girl, this teenager, who, like, what had happened to her, and I don't know, I just didn't see the point of it, and it just kind of fell flat. So I gave it 3 stars. I didn't really enjoy it. The reason I gave it as high as I did was because the writing is really good, and I think just I missed the point of the book, and I didn't understand what it was going for at all. But thankfully, number 7, I really like this book, The War That Saved My Life by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. This is a middle grade book set during the Second World War in England, and this young girl and her brother are evacuated to the English countryside because of the Blitz. This girl has a club foot. She was born with it. It was never really treated. She has been neglected, essentially, by her mother and abused by her mother. And so while this evacuation is traumatic for every other child, she actually finds a lot of freedom in leaving her London apartment with her brother and learning about life for the first time. She was sheltered, kept inside the apartment all the time, not allowed out, not educated, knows nothing really about anything until she is evacuated to the countryside. I loved the main character, Ada, I believe is her name, and what I liked about the character was that she was very nuanced. I feel like sometimes in these types of books, the main child character could be a little bit too sweet, a little bit too precocious maybe. But Ada is not that. She has flaws. She has quote unquote behavior issues at times, understandable given the severe neglect she's faced. She is uneducated, and I just loved how fully realized she felt as a character. It was a really touching book. Great characters, not just Ada, but other characters as well, I thought were also fleshed out and felt very real. And I gave this book 5 stars. Book number 8 is a nonfiction, Memorial Drive, A Daughter's Memoir. This is by Natasha Trethewey. This is the story of how Trethewey's mother was murdered by her ex-stepfather. The book reads very much as her kind of processing her mother's murder and what it meant for her, how it shaped her life, how it shaped her work. Trethewey is a poet, and you really feel that through the book. I felt it had kind of that poet's rhythm a little bit, beautifully written, very sad, but I think a great tribute to her mom, but still having that nuance and honesty to be kind of vulnerable and open about the imperfections of her relationship with her mother as well. I really enjoyed this book, and I gave it 4 stars. Book number 9 is Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. This was a big disappointment. I was so looking forward to this book. I've owned it for a while. And I kept meaning to read it. And I finally read it and wish I hadn't have. So the book is really engaging, and it is kind of looks really dense, and it's all of human history. So you think it would feel really dense, but it doesn't feel dense. And I can appreciate how ambitious this book is, going from Homo sapiens, our very first ancestors, and through every single major evolutionary transition of us as a species. But why this book falls apart for me is the facts. So this was full of evo-psych nonsense. I have a problem with evo-psych. I had this problem with another book that I don't even want to name because I don't even want people to read it. But evo-psych, so evolutionary psychology, is fraught with thought experiments, I'll call them, I guess, just so stories that are presented as fact or presented as this is probably what happened. So this book is unfortunately riddled with that kind of junk theory. These just so stories that are I will admit, very compelling, and they seem to like fill in gaps very neatly, but they have nothing to do with real evidence or with real understanding of evolution or social evolution. So I gave this 2 stars. The only reason it didn't get 1 star is because it was written in a very engaging way. So I gave it 2 stars, but in all honesty, this was a complete letdown for me. On to better things. Book number 10 is Wishful Drinking by Carrie Fisher. This book, I thought it was a memoir. It's less of a memoir and more of just an adaptation of her one-woman show at the time. She shares lots of like family stories, funny anecdotes, like Hollywood gossip in places, jokes. It's really, really funny. It has that Carrie Fisher wit about it. It was just a joy to read it. I read it on audiobook, and that's how I would recommend reading it, because Carrie Fisher narrates it, and she's got like the comedic timing, and like I just don't think you can really replicate that reading it in physical form. So if you're able to listen to it on audiobook, I think you should. It was, like I said, just a joyful, like fun experience, and I gave it 5 stars. Book number 11 is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This is a Hunger Game prequel set during the 10th Games. I hadn't intended on reading this. I picked it up because I really want to read Sunrise on the Reaping, and figured I should just read this one as well. And I'm glad I did. I really enjoyed it. I don't think that I was necessarily a fan of President Snow, or like future President Snow, as a protagonist. This is set when he is a teenager. But because it's through his point of view, we do get a lot of kind of like the inside scoop of like the capital, and I think it really helped to flesh out that world. And there were a couple characters in this book that I thought were really interesting, that I liked learning about, and like I said, there were just some kind of like world building elements that I thought were interesting as well. So I am happy I read it. I gave it 4 stars. Book number 12 is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume. This is a middle grade book. It's a coming of age story following Margaret, who is about to start middle school, and she's moving to a new school. So there's kind of this like bit of fear and anxiety, but also like looking forward to getting older. And it is very much this coming of age story that is this point between like fear of growing up and like longing to be grown up. And it plays that balance really well. I thought Margaret was a really funny character, a very tenacious character. She's the kind of character you want to root for. This book was written in, I think it was like 1970. A lot of this book still is very relevant, because just how kids interact in a person-to-person way is still kind of the same. And how kids like think about growing up, I think, is still very similar. And I just think like the themes still hold true, even if the time and place are a little, out of touch with like modern day middle schoolers. I think there's enough in here for a modern day middle schooler to relate to the essence of growing up, and how it changes like dynamics in your family, and how it changes like your friendships and how they form, and how it changes you and how you think about yourself. So I think this book is still great, and I gave it 4 stars. And finally, the last book that I finished during the first half of the year was Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. This is the 3rd and final book in the Farseer trilogy. I liked this book. Well, liked might even be too strong. I thought this book was fine. I didn't dislike it. There were things that I liked. There were directions that the author takes characters that I didn't think she would go, but I'm glad she went there. So there are things to like, but my main beef with this book is that the action really stalls. And I don't mean action necessarily in terms of like fighting and running and chasing and that kind of action, but just like any kind of action, like just action in general just kind of stops. And it stops for a really, really long time. Certain characters get to a place, a point in the book, an actual physical location, where they just kind of stop and hang tight. They just kind of hang out waiting for this thing to happen. I'm trying not to give spoilers because this is the third in a trilogy, but they just kind of hang out at the spot forever, waiting for things to happen. And then it finally gets to the resolution, but the resolution is like way too fast. It's like 2 seconds and it's done. I feel like 3 whole books leading up to this moment, and this moment is just so short. And I think it was especially noticeable in comparison to the long, drawn-out part that precedes the resolution. I gave it 3 stars because there were other elements of the book, like I said, kind of ways, places she took characters that I wasn't expecting, and I really enjoyed that. But I wish she would have spent more time on those characters, working through those things or coming to those revelations or doing the things that they ended up doing. I wish she would have spent more time getting them to those places through action. So I gave this 3 stars. So those are all of the books I've read so far this year. If you've read any of them, let me know what you thought of them. I would love to have a chat with you in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll chat soon. Take care. Bye.